What's up, guys? Mike Tierney here from Princess Auto. Welcome to Tech Tips with Mike T. Today we're talking about air tools. So when it comes to selecting your air tools for whatever projects you're working on, basically you want to kind of focus on a couple of specifications. So we've talked a little bit about compressors in previous episodes. We want to make sure that you select the tool that's going to do the job that you're working on based on pressure and flow. So what does that look like? Well, pressure is the amount of force that the air system is going to produce. So we rate that in pounds per square inch, PSI. Then we need the flow side. So the flow of air is called CFM, cubic feet per minute. And that's the amount of air that we're going to deliver, or what the tool will require to be delivered to. So we want to really actually reverse engineer the system. We want to make sure that when we select our air system, compressor, tools, and all the components in between, that we actually start with the things that are going to do the work. So far too often we look at the compressor first and try to find what we're going to buy there, and then we go and select the air tools. Well, the best way to do this, and so that you can get the highest performance out of your system, is by selecting the air tools first. So finding what tool you're going to need for the job is, that's your application. So are you nailing, are you screwing on sheet metal? Are you using it in woodworking? What is it you're doing? Auto body work. We want to make sure that you select those tools first. And by looking at the box on the shelf or information on the website, the first two things you're going to want to look at are the specifications based on CFM and at what pressure. So there's usually an information section on the box. It's pretty hard to find it on any air tool, but you definitely can research it. And you're going to look at what CFM the tool requires and what pressure it's going to need. If we don't deliver those two things in the proper amounts, we're going to start to have some issues. Maybe our compressor is too small to deliver that, so then the air tool doesn't perform like you think it might. If it's a nailer, for example, maybe your compressor is a bit small and you can't seem to bury the nails all the way, and you've got to pull out a hammer and finish it off. Those could be indicators that your compressor, the flow rating of the compressor, does not match or equal or higher than the air tool's demands. So if you start by selecting the air tools that you need, and you want to make sure that your compressor can deliver what they're actually requiring, that's a really important way to kind of build your air compressor system. So there's lots of air tools out there. We kind of split up the two into into two categories, and we talk about tools that demand continuous and we demand intermittent air. So when we get into the different types of the tools that are that we carry, we'll talk a little bit about maybe this tool is going to run all the time, so it might demand more air or a higher volume of air that's available from your compressor. So it's really important to select your tools, then your compressor, and then all the accessories in between, because that will really tell us the demand that you're going to require from the compressor. Whether you're using one tool, two tools, 10 tools, if they're all being used at the same time, they're demanding a lot of flow from that compressor system, and if that compressor can't deliver that, then you're going to run into some tools that may not do the job properly. They might run sluggish. They may not run at all, because if it's a higher tool taking a larger demand, some of the smaller tools may not see that air. So select the air tools first, then have a look at what compressor that you're going to need to deliver that air. So let's talk a little bit about the groupings of air tools. So the first one we're going to talk a little bit about is nailers. So lots of varieties on nailers, whether you're doing roofing nailing or construction, building, molding work, whatever it is that you're looking at, they pretty much make very specific nailers for that. So nailers are actually one of those air tools that require far less air typically, CFM pressure, than many of the other types of air tools. So you can typically get away with a lower cost air compressor when it comes to running air tools, especially if you're doing molding work in the house, doing little repairs. As you get larger nailers, they start to demand a little bit of air, but for the most part, under 3 or 4 CFM for most of these air tools in this category. So some of the different models, the model that I have up here, it's similar to a roofing nailer. In fact, you could probably use it as a roofing setup, but we brand this one as a siding nailer. So basically it uses coiled type nails. It gives you the option when you open up the carousel here, there is a plate that you can actually adjust up and down for a variety of different size nails. So if you want to go from an inch, inch and a half, or you need a larger depth nail, you can actually just adjust the carousel without having to go with a different nailer completely. And that goes for many of the other nailers out there. A lot of them have a variety of sizes that you can choose your brad nails, your finishing nails, your different types of nails out there. Keep in mind any air tool, specifically this category as well, right out of the box, they may run a little sluggish. They may not work 100% like you think they might. During the manufacturing, they will add extra grease and the building parts of the tool. So you may need to season it a little bit. We'll get into how that works later on. You're going to add air tool oil every time or every day that you're going to use them. You don't have to add air tool if you're not using them, but if you're going to use them, it's a good idea to add air tool oil through your connection port, just 1 or 2 drops, and that will help lubricate the components that are in that are inside the air tool, the plunger that moves up and down. It keeps it lubricated and the parts moving well. Every now and again, you do need to kind of do some maintenance on, the specifically nailers, where your nails will eject into the bump nailers, and you get shards of metal from the little pins that hold, or the wires that hold the coils together in this case, and they do build up, and you do need to kind of clean them. Just make sure that you're brushing them out or blowing them out, but making sure you're always wearing safety glasses. So when it comes to nailers, all kinds of options. Small pin nailers if you're doing, upholstery, that kind of stuff, to large contract nailers when you're putting frames up and that kind of stuff. So the next set of air tools I want to just talk about are metal fab type tools. So tools that you're typically using with metalworking. So auto body, any kind of forming, shaping, bending, cutting, all of those kinds of tools. There's tons of them. We're going to showcase a few here. So first one I want to kind of just showcase is our panel crimper punch. This tool makes short work of thin sheet metal up to around 18, 20 gauge at the most. And it's actually 2 things. It does 2 applications with this one punch. So on this side, you have the actual punch. So when you hit the trigger, piston comes down and you can punch holes along your sheet metal. So if you're attaching 2 pieces of sheet metal that maybe you've created your own paneling and you want to attach to, you can spot weld those punch holes and then just grind that down and have a nice seam to work with. On the other side, we have a flaring or a crimping tool. So this creates a little crimp, and what it does is you can take 2 panels, flip them over, and you'll actually weld the seam flat. So this is a great auto body tool that you can use to recreate fenders or body paneling or crimp edges very quickly and easily with this punch and crimp tool. We also have tools that are used for rust removal, so surface preparation. It's called a needle scaler. The needles at the end will pulsate back and forth, and they start to kind of etch away the rust that it might be on a frame. Maybe you're doing a frame up restoration. It's not probably ideal on thin sheet metal, but you definitely want to use it on a heavier steel. These will pulsate. They do wear down, and there are replacement kits available. But a lot of other uses, or a major use that they use for stonework. So if you're an artist and you're doing carving or stone statues, that kind of stuff, they use needle scalers as well. The majority of people that use them are typically for surface preparation. We also have shears. So we've got a couple of different designs of shears. We have a straight grip shear like this one here. We also have a pistol grip shear that for comfort. It all depends on what you want out of your tool. Some people find that this is a little harder on your wrist, whereas some people like the pistol grip. But they do the same thing. You just have to make sure on the specification that you're looking at how thick or how thin the metal, the maximum that it can cut. In some cases it's 18 or 22 gauges. The lower the gauge number, the thicker that metal. So just be mindful that the jaws can only handle up to a certain amount of gauge thickness. Otherwise you can break the pivot pins on them and you'll have some issues there. If you're grinding or trying to get into tight spots, we also have little mini die grinders. They spin at 10,000 RPM and higher. They've got collets that you can adjust for different stem tools, for different grinding blades. And these are a really high speed, high pitch. You never want to use these without hearing protection. And great for getting into small spots. Super lightweight tool, and some have adjustable speed ratings on them. Just depends on the model you're looking at. But what you will find that is different between rotary or cutting or grinding tools, for the most part, is they're always going to have a safety device on them. Because if you lay that down on the surface, upside down with the air attached, if that paddle, your trigger, engages and you've got a blade that's sticking out, it can start spinning. That can come off the table and injure. So you'll find that all air tools will have a trigger system if they have some sort of blade that's going to be rotating, so that you don't inadvertently injure yourself. So there's a safety switch that you just have to flick, and then you can engage the trigger. So die grinders, great little tool. They fit in a toolbox, really easy, and they're super lightweight. They come on sale all the time, and they are a great little air tool. They do consume a fair amount of air. So if you've got a smaller air compressor, you're looking at CFMs 5 and higher, some of the smaller air compressors may not be able to deliver what this tool actually needs. This is what we would call a continuous tool, so you can grind away for quite some time, and that will consume a lot of air and cause the air compressor to maybe not deliver what you might expect out of a small tool like this. If you want to drill, so we've got pistol grip drills. In this case, we have an angled drill. This angled drill basically allows us to go 90 degrees down. So if you're getting into tight spots where you've got to punch holes out, this is a great tool for that. The regular pistol grip drills, again, just for regular metal work. We also carry a variety of others. Obviously there's a ton of different sanders out there. So sanders, surface preparation, whether it's for possibly wood, but mostly metal. Some oscillate, some just have a belt sander, some have just a back and forth sanding plate. Some of them have a vac system that's attached to them. It's a great way to prep a surface more evenly in a very short order. The beauty about air sanders is if you're working with flammable material, so if you are using it with woodworking and you've got some really fine dust, if you're using, say, a power tool, that dust can get into where the electric motor's turning. There is a bit of a spark there, so you may have an ignition source. Likewise, if you're working with flammable paints, typically an air sander, you're not going to get any kind of ignition source out of that because it doesn't have an electric motor. So it's a great option if you run into those situations. We also have little nibblers, so very similar to the punch, but the nibbler basically is a cutting path. It's similar to a pair of scissors. It's a cross between a punch and a shear. It can nibble out a very thin path, and you can push through if you're, the tool just cuts just like a pair of scissors through. If you need to round off edges or make contours, this is a great option to have for metal forming, sheet metal. We also have another style of grinder. So it's not quite a die grinder, it's a smaller grinder. But again, safety first. So it has a lock, it has a shield. These do spin at quite high RPMs. So if you don't maintain your blades properly, they can come apart. And there's a shroud that will protect your hands. But again, light tools. This is so easy to use. You don't have a big bulky grinder like you may have with power tools. You can get into spots where you may not be able to get in, a 6 or an 8 inch, electric grinder. So, and it's not heavy on your hand all the time. That's a really bonus about air tools. They're not typically as heavy as some of the power tools that you're going to be having to work with, whether that's for an hour, 2 hours, or a few minutes. They're very easy on the wrists and hands, and they're lightweight for a really nice little package. So, but again, selecting them based on their flow and pressure. Always the CFM and the pressure they need. If you're not right with that, it's not going to perform like you think it should. And then we've got a little bit larger angle grinders. We've got sanders that are slightly different than a palm or these types of air sanders, but this one here does great for edging work. It's a belt sander that's super easy to change, and it's great for surface preparation. We have air chisels. So the air chisel has something that looks like a spring on the end. This is a pistol grip type. And you've got different chisel sizes and types that you can, remove, bolts if they're stripped. You can cut through them. If it's old welds that you need to, on heavier metal, you can shear off that weld. If it's concrete work that you want to just kind of bust up a little bit, again, make sure that you're wearing safety protection when you're doing that. One word of caution, when you're handling these, don't hold on to that spring. When you're, if it's in your hand, if your fingers get anywhere near that spring, it'll feel like someone slams their finger in a car door, speaking from experience. So just keep your fingers away from that spring when it's vibrating. The shock wave that it gives off, you're perfectly good when you're holding it where the trigger and the handle is. But just keep fingers away from that spring. You'll regret it very quickly. Last one on the list is our series of riveters. So we've got a variety of different riveters in different brands. Great for joining thin sheet metal. In some cases, some people use these on certain parts of plastic. It all depends on what you're trying to do, but it's a great way to, use air if you choose to do a lot of riveting. It's much easier on the arms and the hands than actually manually using a riveter. So riveters, We sell them in all different sizes. They have replaceable jaws for the different size rivets. Next up, impact guns and wrenches. So tons of these on the market, from a variety of different sizes. Just going to point out a couple of things. So when they talk about the size of an impact gun or impact wrench, they're usually typically talking about the drive side. So when we look at the drive side here, that's our drive. So whether it's a 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, all the way up 1 inch, and I've even seen them a lot higher, but they become more automated. So you want to, pick the sockets or the different products you're going to attach to this based on your drive size. So when it also comes to the type of sockets you're going to use, you want to make sure that you're not using chrome type sockets. Sockets that are chrome, they're designed to take a less of an impact. They're strong, but they don't like the impact that a wrench or a impact gun will create. There's a hammering effect that these will shatter. So stay away from chrome type sockets when you're using either an impact wrench or a gun. You're looking to go with impact sockets. So the impact socket, they're typically a darker color. They usually have a ball that the drive will link into, and these are designed to create the impacts or take the impacts. They're made of a softer material, and they will last and won't shatter nearly as quick as what you would find on a standard socket. So what makes an impact gun different than another impact gun? So some of them are composite now, so to lighten up the weight. This little beast here, to hold that all day. So they use composite components now on some of the higher end units. It just creates, there's just as strong, it's just lighting up, they're creating a lightweight cast or body on them. Basically they have different types of hammers inside. So in a unit like this, it may have a dual or 3 hammer type system. The hammers that knuckle back and forth inside, that's the clacking sound that you get out of an impact gun. That's what's actually tightening or loosening. You get different torque specs. So depending on the products that you're working on or the jobs that you're at, you may need to torque something down to a bolt to 50 foot-pounds, or in a bigger case maybe it's 700 or 800 foot-pounds. So obviously some of the smaller units are not going to get you that high, so you're having to go with heavier duty impact guns. Likewise with impact wrenches, so typically they have a ratcheting style head that ratchets back and forth to allow you to undo or do a bolt or a nut. They typically will have torque ratings as well. Now keep in mind, once again, anytime we're talking about air tools, we want to make sure that we can deliver what the tool is demanding. So this impact unit here is going to take a lot more air than this unit here. So you've got to really make sure that you've got a large enough compressor to deliver that air that this is going to do, especially if you're relying on it to do a certain amount of torque. If you don't give that flow or that pressure to that tool and you need an X amount of torque out of this tool, it may not deliver it properly. So you may have to use another torque wrench, or further tighten that to test that to make sure that it's at the right torque specs. So just make sure when you're buying your air ratchets or air wrenches, you're considering pressure and flow, PSI and CFM. So next we're going to talk about paint applications. So paint guns, a little bit on touch-up guns, and going from a liquid type paint to a powder coating paint. So lots of options on the market, whether you're auto body painting. Some of these paint guns can also do latex. So if you're doing woodworking, you're painting wood or fences, decks, stains. Some of them have that ability. It just depends on how you're going to water down or dilute that paint. In the case of latex, you might be adding a certain amount of water to bring the consistency, the viscosity of it down. If it's automotive paint, depending on what types of paint you're looking at, you have to go to your paint supplier to get those the mixes that you're going to need to get that paint down to the right thinness or thickness that you need for your coating. So a couple of different styles that we've got in front of us. So two different styles that we've got here. Basically same thing. They allow you to put a certain amount of paint down on a pattern, except you'll notice that one is a hopper feed. So it has the hopper above the paint gun. And that just allows gravity to, bring down your paint. Your air will come in and you'll get your paint and air mix. You can control all of that and fine tune that misting. And then you've also got your siphon fed. So you also have a tank that will draw up as air passes over the gun. So you're gonna have air coming through the gun and then paint getting drawn up through a little tube, and that's called siphoning. So, if you're doing consistent upright painting, this could work fine. But the paint can get heavy and your wrist can get a little tired. If you're having to go over and above, a roof or a hood, well, this type of paint gun might be a hopper style or a siphon fed might work well. So some have plastic hoppers, some have stainless. Depending on the paint that you're using, you've got to verify with your paint supplier how it reacts to plastic or other materials. So some metal-based paint can actually react to the plastic and you'll start getting a melting here and it'll actually burn through. Probably not very good for the paint job. So you may have to go with a stainless or a metal type. So always verify from your paint supply what your paint should be put in, how it's going to be mixed, and how it's going to be applied. So for other applications, for really the hobbyist, we have hobby paint guns, so airbrushes. So typically you're not going to use a super large compressor with this, so you can get away with the smaller air compressors and just a very small bowl on top that you're going to use for airbrushing. So artistry work, maybe some small detailing, pinstriping, that kind of stuff. Great option. There's a few kits available, at different price points. Now, if it's liquid paint that you don't want to go with, you also have options now, and it's becoming really popular, is our powder coating system. We have a couple of different systems available. This is probably one of the most common small versions of powder coating systems on the market. It uses an electrical current to create basically a static field that when you put your powdered paint in and use air to push it through your gun, it's going to create a kind of a magnetic field, and the powder is going to bond to that surface as long as it's ultra clean. So then you've got to take it and put it into a powder coating oven or an oven that you never use to cook in, and basically bring it up to a certain temperature, 350, 400, 415, depending on the paint, will liquefy and bond to that surface. That's becoming super popular. Lots of people are going to this. It's a great way to coat small components and get a really nice hard finish. They typically, with powder coating, if it's way more scratch resistant than what it would be if you were doing a liquid type coating. Well, that's it for Tech Tips with Mike T. See you next time.